Welcome to the One Advantage podcast, exploring the intersections of peer power, culture, and agility. Your hosts, Mike Richardson, Jason Richmond, and Leo Bottary, co-founders of the One Advantage community of practice and advantage peer groups. For more information, please visit us at the One Advantage podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the One Advantage podcast. And we've got all three of us here today. That's a little unusual, and it's great to see. We got Jason, we got Leo, and myself. And we're going to find out, as usual, in a moment, what everybody's been up to and where the heck everybody's been. And Leo has been all over the place once again, as has Jason. Me, not so much. I got COVID, so we'll talk more about that in a moment. But we've got a really interesting topic today, everybody. This will be the second in our sort of series of topics around this whole idea of the new talent war. What does it take these days to win the new war, to attract, develop, and retain talent? And we're going to talk about a really good research study that we came across that just hit the deck from McKinsey, and we've all taken a good look at it, and we're going to share some insights with you, and of course talk about how the dots join up with all of our work around the One Advantage, and really tapping into the peer-powered culture of agility that we all need these days. But before we do that, as usual, let's find out, Leo, where the heck have you been and what have you been up to?
Well, last Friday, I had a really terrific all-day client engagement with a company out of Mountain View, California that was really terrific. Home for the weekend. I'm in the middle of a move right now. So then if I'm not moving, I'm moving, right? Because then I'm on a plane again, and was in Minneapolis for a workshop for Vistage, and actually did two back-to-backs on Wednesday and Thursday for Vistage Group's Endeavor. So it was basically 5 3-hour workshops in 3 days with, by the way, many delayed and canceled flights, getting in at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, having to be where I needed to be by like 7, So,
and we know what we call that, everybody. We call that VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And Leo has been experiencing airline and travel VUCA.
You just got to be agile, though. No worries.
That's right.
I love it. And all of these workshops, Leo, are around peer innovation, correct?
Yeah. It's really showing people not only how they can better maximize their group experience, but we spend a great deal of time talking about how to take these principles and bring them into either starting with your executive leadership team or for employee development day is a terrific part. So.
Yeah, awesome. Great. And Jason, what about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I didn't have any travel issues, but this is a fabulous week though. Got to work with a couple of my colleagues in Philadelphia, and we're engaging with a client. We're in the middle of developing and creating a high-level leadership program all around the ability to lead hybrid teams. And you talk about the relevant of today topics, because any leader in any organization is going to have responsibility in recruitment, talent retention, those types of things. So we've been kind of collaborating, sleeves rolled up, neck deep, working with clients and really developing this leadership curriculum, and it's been fascinating.
Yeah, and everybody, if you don't already, make sure that you sign up not only for the One Advantage podcast here, but make sure you sign up for the One Advantage daily news feed. And we'll be sure to put that link into the show notes as well here. In fact, there's a landing page for the One Advantage if you haven't been there, and it's got the podcast, the news feed, all that kind of stuff, because there were some really interesting articles that we curated into that feed over the last few days, in addition to the article, the research we're going to discuss today. And it was all about the latest research data, Jason, about what you've just been talking about, where the hybrid work world is going. Yeah. And it's reinforcing this idea that hybrid work is not going away. It's going to be around for the long haul. What do you think, Jason?
Well, and it's funny. I like to think about what I've done recently and relative today. I just picked up and finished this book that just got released by Dr. Alan Patterson, Burn Ladders and Build Bridges, Pursuing Work with Meaning and Purpose.
Yeah.
And what a fascinating alignment between his work and his strategy in that book, and the fact that, the research we're talking about today, the different personas. And if you take a look at every persona, who doesn't want to burn down those ladders and build bridges? If you're really going to have a diverse workforce, if you're really going to have a recruiting platform, right? You have to have a lot of bridges, and having that open flow. And I really summarized it to me really well in preparing for our conversation today.
Yeah, and in the daily feed, I saw an article about Google. I suppose this isn't terribly shocking to understand with a software-oriented company, but Google has more portfolio professionals than it has corporate professionals. In other words, Google has less employees than it does contractors, freelancers, subcontractors, self-employed, gig workers, etc. Now, I suppose that's not shocking for an organization like Google, but I suspect everybody that more and more and more organizations are going to trend in that same direction. And that has a direct relationship to what we're about to discuss today, which is this fantastic article and research study from McKinsey. We'll put it in the show notes. And basically, the title is The Great Attrition is Making Hiring Harder. Are you searching in the right talent pools? That's the kind of headline question that the research asks. And then as you start to read it, it says, you know what? People are quitting at record levels, yet companies are still trying to attract and retain them the same old ways. New research that we'll talk about here identifies 5 types of workers that employers can reach to fill jobs. So that is right down our street, everybody. It's all about what kinds of diversity do you need to be the engine of peer power. It's all about how do you develop a culture that is inclusive of that diversity, and how do you harness all of that for agility. So let's get right into it, guys. Jason, as you sort of reviewed this research study and article, what were the things that sort of most popped for you?
Well, first of all, your Google example is the perfect example. You just described one of the personas that this article talks about, and that's the do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah.
Right. And it is flooding the organization. So the thing that popped out to me was the 5 different personas, the 5 different categories or types of recruiting pool, people out there to recruit. And a lot of reflection, a couple things. One, my team at Ideal Outcomes, I have representation of all 5.
Yeah.
I can easily pinpoint my organization. I have got all 5 personas in my own group. But 2, my personal belief is I don't think these 5 personas are brand new. I think these personas have always been there.
Yeah.
I think the percentage of the workforce of those personas has shifted drastically.
Yeah. And what Jason's referring to, everybody, is when you get into this research study that'll be in the show notes, what it's really saying is if you're not careful, everybody, you still have an employee attraction and development and retention approach that is addressing one of what they now call 5 personas. The first of the 5 they call traditionalists.
Yes.
And so if you're taking a traditional approach to going after the traditional labor pool that you've traditionally gone after in traditional ways, you're going to find yourself increasingly disappointed that is a shrinking labor pool. And surprise, surprise, your demand for that labor is exceeding the supply of that labor. And so you have no choice except to look at the other 4 personas. Do you want to pick up from there, Leo, and share some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's about time. They should have been looking at those 5 personas all along. Yep. We've got this archaic system of hiring, right? Where we have this process of elimination, bunch of resumes, they do keyword searches, they create the description of the position and the qualifications of it to be so narrow, they blow out, countless candidates who would be terrific at that job, who would come at it from a different perspective and probably do, a better job, quite frankly. And then you get to the process of selection. But unless you survive that process of elimination, which those other 4 personas did not, now you're stuck with what you've had all along, which I don't think worked particularly well anyway. it's times like this that actually challenge us. Creativity, as we all know, comes from scarcity. It's not from having abundance. We don't get creative when we can do anything we want. We get creative when we have constraints and we've got to figure out how to do things. Jason and I were talking briefly about this idea of the 2008, the pandemic in 2020. Yeah. Most CEOs would not have voluntarily sent everyone home and said, okay, knock yourselves out, go work from home now, we're good, right? But actually, they learned a lot. They learned a lot about their people. They learned a lot of productivity and different ways of doing things. If every CEO and head of HR sees this as the opportunity it is to actually bring people into the workforce and create that peer culture of, adaptability and accountability, essentially, and agility, with the diversity now, that will, I think, make the whole value proposition that much richer. I think it's an awesome opportunity. I think they should embrace it. They should put their arms around all five of these things.
And I think Leo kind of started by saying at the beginning there, he said something pretty much that said, McKinsey stating the obvious, which some of these big consulting firms are prone to do. So I love what Leo said, that actually these are not new personas in many ways. Perhaps McKinsey's article and research here is just bringing them forth. But let's just step through the 5 personas before we go much further. Number 1, we already mentioned, which is the traditionalists. Number 2, that Jason already mentioned when we were talking about the Google example of freelancers and gig workers, is called the do-it-yourselfers. Mm-hmm. And they're really looking for autonomy. And then the third category is what they call caregivers. And these are people who have practical challenges of, giving care to young people or old people or sick people, etc. And they've just decided to prioritize that more than they used to. The fourth category is called idealists, and this might skew, towards younger people coming up through, the next generation who have these ideal visions of how life should be. And then the fifth category is what they call relaxers. And these are people that for their own reasons, their own passions, their own purpose in life, have just decided to deprioritize their career in some way, shape, or form. When you read through those 5 categories, Jason, you've already talked about the DIYers. Which other ones kind of really piqued your interest or reminded you of some demographics in your own team?
I love the idealist. And I want to get back to Leo made a point about, the system and that type of stuff. I mean, these hiring managers, how many hiring managers out there today are traditionalists? Right? Organizations have to look at those roles themselves and make sure we're including all the other personas into that role to expand our thinking. But I got a great story. It was last month. I was facilitating a leadership offsite with a good cross-function group of different generations and different leadership roles. And this was a mid-sized company. And we got into, they called it kind of a strategic planning meeting, right? We could go on a whole tangent about what strategic planning actually is.
Yes, we could.
But that's what they called it. So I started out by asking everybody in the room, what is strategic planning? And the traditionalist was saying, well, a 3-year plan, a 2-year plan, even had one saying it's a 5-year vision, that type of stuff. And I got down to a couple of young into their 20s, 22, 23 years old. And the gentleman said 2 months. And the whole room just was in shock. And he said, listen, my career, my world, the world I live in, we have a hard time looking forward much past 2 months. We're contract workers, we're moving around, we're doing things. That's that perception. And he brought more value to that meeting, to some of the traditionalists understanding their way of thinking and their preferred way of work. It was hugely successful.
Yeah, it's very well said. And, in my work around agility and the way we frame that up, of course, it's really all of the above. You've got to work backwards from the 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year, 18-month horizon, whatever's appropriate for your business. You've got to work forwards from the, 1 minute, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 quarter, and sort of make it all meet in the middle. The idealists, right? And making sure that our culture, our conversation flow, our approach to strategy and execution is inclusive of firing them up. The last thing we want to be doing, everybody, is firing up 4 of the 5 categories of persona, but firing down, cooling off, causing the other one to get cold feet. So this is all about how do you mobilize a culture, peer power, agility to mobilize all 5 of these new personas now that you've got to pay attention to. Leo, welcome back. I see you had some bandwidth issues there for a moment. You probably missed some of that, but we were talking about...
I did not. I heard it all.
Okay,
actually,
perfect.
I had the door open and there was noise out here.
There you go. I managed to make sure my cats are not in the vicinity today, so I'm good today. Which of these other categories that we haven't mentioned so far, Leo, kind of stood out for you? The caregivers, the relaxers, etc.
Yeah, I'm not sure that any stands out for me as much as I look at them really as an ensemble. I really think about them as a block, And here's another, dynamic here that at work is that people who are leaving their jobs now are not typically going back to a similar job they had at just a competitor.
Yeah.
They're going to something completely different, which only makes the talent pool that you traditionally, quote, relied upon, who had those things that checked off all the boxes. Now you're going to be getting more and more applicants that are really interested in changing careers and wanting to work for different organizations in different roles. And I think our criteria for how we evaluate how people can add value and how people can be an absolutely fantastic contributor to our culture. And really, I think add, again, through the diversity, add some real real spice and perspectives. And, I think that's, again, a big opportunity. And I'm not sure we're going to have much choice. I think this is coming our way. And we have to really be thinking about that.
We have to, even in the interview process, Leo, I mean, when I'm talking to candidates and stuff, it's not so much about the skill anymore or the expertise to do that job, but it's what transfers. What transfers from what you were doing before that would actually bring a higher level of value to this position that I probably didn't even think about.
Yeah, and
we can't focus on the minute things.
Yeah, the research report goes into that data, everybody, quite nicely, actually, and it really makes the point that you are no longer looking for talent just in a vertical industry pool,
correct,
or a local geography. All of those barriers have now been broken down, which is a double-edged sword. Number one, you've got a much bigger pool in which to go find talent because you're no longer constrained within your industry or within your geography. But it also means that there are a lot of other companies going after exactly the same pool that you are, unconstrained by those boundaries that used to be there, which means if your culture, your approach, your ethos, your vision, your strategy, your core values, if they don't stand out from the crowd, if your approach doesn't have a sharper edge to it, you're going to be disappointed. And in the research report, McKinsey says this. He says these differences that show that no single solution to attract enough people to fill all the job openings and retain a productive workforce will work. Instead, employers can take a multi-pronged approach to reach different talent pools. And what that's saying to me, everybody, is more than ever before, one size does not fit all. In many ways, what this research report is saying is you've always known that you're in a market for talent, just like you're in a market for products and services, where you're trying to win market share from your end customer, your end clients. We understand that in a market of products and services, we tend to segment the market into different sectors and different market segments. And what I think this research report is really saying is when you turn the other way and you look backwards, if you like, into the talent market, you've got to do the same thing. You've got to look at these different market segments now, these different market sectors. They've identified 5 of them with these 5 different personas, and you've got to have a different positioning strategy and a different go-to-market strategy and a different story, frankly, to be able to address each of those market sectors. What do you think, Jason?
Well, they're all looking for different things.
Yeah.
They're all motivated in different ways.
Yeah.
They're all in different stages of life. So again, I talked about building bridges and burning down ladders. You have to build a bridge for everybody to pass.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like selling a Mercedes, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to sell a Mercedes to me, an old gray-haired guy, you're going to emphasize different aspects of that Mercedes. If you're trying to sell a Mercedes to a 20-something or a 30-something, you're going to emphasize different. It's the same vehicle, it's the same product, but you're going to emphasize different aspects of it to speak to their interests versus my interests versus a 30-something or a 40-something or a family person's interests or whatever it happens to be. Leo, your thoughts?
So a couple things. One, you started by talking about Google, and you think about the changing and improving, I think culture at Microsoft and other great companies. We don't have to wonder if this is going to work because some of the top companies in the world have been doing this for a long time. That's how they hire, right? This is not. Oftentimes, they discern the difference between things you can teach people and things you can't in many respects, right? It becomes about who you are, not only what you can do. And I think anytime you have a non-traditional employee, if you can describe the position specifically enough and what you're looking for, have them tell you how they can add value, and I think you'll find it pretty amazing, when it's almost like, and we've talked about this before in terms of how people use assessments. They don't use them as coaching tools. They try to use them as selection tools. And there's no right persona necessarily or a specific one for every single job. It only speaks to how that person's going to go about being successful at it. And the other thing, just last but not least, you brought up, Mike, in terms of understanding your audience. I can't tell you the number of CEOs that I come across all the time who say, I don't know what these Gen Zs want. I don't know what these millennials are looking for in the workplace. And of course, what's the obvious question? Have you ever asked them? Oh, maybe that would be a good idea. Maybe, I can actually find out what they're looking for as opposed to be sitting around in some office in a conference room. Guess at it. And
correct.
This is where this kind of dialogue and this move to inclusive leadership, which I think anybody who's participated in peer activities recognizes how to do that, how to tap into collective intelligence, right, Mike? And to be able to get people to really participate and actually feel ownership of the solutions going forward. But I think the opportunities are huge. I think this is the best thing that's ever happened to CEOs and HR professionals right now, that they finally are going to be put in a position where they really are going to, I think, improve their workforce.
Yeah, well said. And, we've heard this data from all kinds of different places recently, but this research report also verifies this kind of data point where it says that to some degree, in the next 3 to 6 months, to some significant degree, 40% of your employees are looking to leave your company and go change job. What do you think about that, Jason?
I think it's real. We're all three of us are engaging with clients every day, and I pretty much guarantee you there's not any one of us that couldn't think about an example of a client you're working with that's having that issue. Turnover. Yeah. And it's more prevalent, I think, right now today than I've ever seen it.
Yeah. And we see it on the headline news, right? At airports, right? And airlines. They just can't get the staff they're looking for. We see it on, when we go to a local restaurant and the service is a little bit slower than perhaps we're used to. And it's everywhere, everybody. And it is very real. And I think actually I like the way that this research report sort of frames it up. And sort of doubles, triples down, Leo, on what's been patently obvious, to those of us closer to the center of this universe anyway. But now, as you said, this is going to be increasingly obvious, increasingly painful, and increasingly full of opportunity for those leaders and those organizations that can pivot further faster into this new groove and start getting it right. What do you think, Leo?
Well, Mike, you offered a really great reminder, I think, to all of us that let's not beat up the people who are showing up and serving us, right? If someone's understaffed, those who are showing up in there are probably working longer hours under difficult conditions and all of that. Let's have a level of patience and appreciation and gratitude for them stepping up and being there in whatever way they can. And I think some very challenging times. And I think just as customers and clients and all that, I think we've got to be mindful of that.
Yeah. You know, Mike, I also hear all the time people don't want to work, and I just don't buy it. Right? People do want to work. People want that fulfillment. They just want to work differently.
And it's who they want to work for, right? They want to work, but they want to work for the right organization. Who do they want to work for? And increasingly, everybody, in what mode do they want to be working?
Yeah, thinking, maybe I could enjoy my job. How about that?
And flexibility was one of the key parameters that comes out of this report. So we're back where we started, everybody. This whole world of hybrid work is not going away. We're going to have to consider more scenarios for hybrid work. We're going to have to consider more scenarios for these different personas of talent that we're working with. And we're going to have to consider more scenarios, everybody, for how the future may take shape. And how are we going to develop the agility and the culture of agility and the peer-powered culture of agility that we're going to need to be successful as we go forward into that future, leveraging the only advantage we have, which is a peer-powered culture of agility. Jason, as we begin to land this plane here, what other thoughts do you have for everybody that's coming off of this topic and this research report?
I guess what comes right top of my mind is keep an open mind, but don't be afraid to try something different, right? Don't be afraid to loosen up your guidelines and your selection pools and interview differently and take different approaches. Don't be stuck in the mud. That would be my advice from today.
Yeah, well said. And Leo, what final thoughts do you have for our listeners?
It's so funny, maybe using slightly different words, but I would really double down on what Jason said. I don't think there's any question about that. I think we have to just really open up our minds. And once we do, I think we're going to really start seeing. And again, I don't think this is about wondering if this is going to work or not. Some of the best companies in the world, this is what they've been doing for a while, and it's working, and I think it can work for everybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I had a client reach out to me the other day and ask me about, hey, Mike, can you remind us, how do we interview for emotional intelligence? And I said, whoa, that is, you just hit the nail on the head there, right? What's that old saying? If we're not careful, we hire for IQ and we fire for EQ. Because what we find is that the resume looked great. This person interviewed really well, technically, but they didn't really fit in very well in our culture, and they have a little bit too much of an ego, which fires up their they get triggered very easily, and their EQ isn't fitting in very well, and obviously below EQ we could go to sort of resilience, and below that we could go to composure. And I just reminded the client that it's all about behavioral interviewing, everybody, isn't it? Tell me about a time when you were in this kind of circumstance or this kind of situation. What happened? How did you handle it? Who did what? What part did you play? What did you learn? How did you grow? And how does that show up in you today, kind of thing? And everybody, I just think that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, those kinds of interview questions, there'll be a lot of stories being told about how people navigated this new world and war and landscape for talent. And there's an awful lot to learn and grow and do better with here. Jason, any final thoughts from you?
I'm just saying, do it differently. Again, I'm sticking with what I said. I mean, be open-minded. Listen to people. Go ask them. CEOs sitting at your desk, you don't know what people expect. Go ask them.
Yeah. That's it, everybody. Thanks for being here again. Another great topic. I am sure we will be back to the same topic time after time after time. How do we win the new war for talent? Leo, it was great to pin you down again for a few minutes. Have a great travel. Jason, I think you said you were off to St. Thomas in the near future. Have a lovely time. I forgot to tell you, everybody, I got COVID. I had to isolate for about 10 days, of course, on the East Coast, but bouncing back now. Have a great couple of weeks, everybody. We'll see you next time for the next episode of the One Advantage podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening to the One Advantage podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider helping us by rating us wherever you listen, spreading the word, having us as a guest on your podcast or webinar, and mentioning us in social media. Find us at the One Advantage podcast, where you can get more information about us and this episode. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to more great episodes to come.